All right, so here we are with our intro to NerdFathers, and we are, starting this podcast, YouTube channel. Whatever you want to call it, all the above.
We're gonna do it all.
Yeah, why not? Why not? So, and we kind of wanted to give a little introduction to ourselves, what we were doing, why we were doing it, and then from there, we'll move into like an actual discussion of the sort of stuff that we're going to be doing, and maybe a little preview hopefully, and you guys like it, and give us your comments, your feedback. We'd love to hear what you have to say. Love to know if there's content you'd love us to talk about. So
should we introduce ourselves first?
Probably would make a lot of sense. I mean, when you introduce yourself to somebody, that's usually what you do.
Right.
All right.
I guess I'll go first.
Go for it, man.
I'm Chris Parr. Wish I had more to say.
I'm Aaron D. Schneider. I'm an author. Been friends with Chris for a long time now. And so, and we decided we were going to start this podcast / YouTube channel / whatever. We're going to have to condense that somehow. But,
yes.
In part.
Making content.
Yeah, in part to make content for, my website and for other stuff like that. But just in general to just interact with fans and with other people who love the kind of stuff that we love.
Right.
So, why NerdFathers?
Easy question, I guess.
Yeah.
We're nerds.
We are nerds.
And we have no kids whatsoever.
And
we're fathers.
We're fathers, yeah. We're fathers. So, we both have multiple children who are all almost as big of nerds as we are. Raising them right. So
indoctrinated.
Yeah. So you will enjoy it. So and so part of it, we come from this perspective of being people who have been kind of invested in a lot of nerd stuff, Dungeons and Dragons, video games, that sort of stuff.
Anime.
And you say, well, yeah, you're anime. Saying, well, yeah, we'll get into some of some more about our individual perspectives, what makes us different or interesting.
Right.
But that's the idea. And then, we come from a perspective of fathers, family men who, we want to see good storytelling because we've seen how it's enhanced and enriched our lives, and kind of looking at it too from like how it could enhance and enrich the lives of others. Lives of our kids, that sort of thing like that. And also it's just a lot of fun. So,
So you said storytelling, so kind of gave away what we're doing, what we're talking about. So
I suppose I did.
Yeah, why we're here, why we're doing this.
Yeah.
Talking about stories.
Yeah, we love stories.
And all of its forms, right? I mean, stories comes in so many different ways, right? I mean, the oral tradition of just passing on stories verbally. But I mean, modern day, we got movies, we got games, video games, especially video games. Like the stories of video games have become amazing lately. It's not just Mario jumping on it.
Yeah. We have podcasts, you have books, you have all these different forms of media and formats. And that was kind of what inspired some of this, right? Was that we kind of said, it'd be interesting to take, and we've been wanting to do it for a long time.
Right.
Like that. That was part of it. We've been wanting to do it for a while to see, and some of it was like, oh, should we just do it just a gaming thing? Should we do just something talking about, Dungeons and Dragons, or just talking about video games or whatever?
Yeah.
And then we just said, screw it. Why don't we just do it all? You know?
And like stories is kind of a good way to say what they all are, right? Ultimately, these are stories. When people create these things, they're saying something. They're telling a story, and that's kind of neat.
Yeah.
So,
sharing ideas, sharing perspectives, sharing experiences, and that sort of stuff. And I have just all sorts of different things. And the one part that is great about storytelling, and as an author and a storyteller that way, that I really love is when you can put something in a work that somebody else can identify with, right? That they can read that and be like, yes, like I felt that thing. I have, I know this thing. Or, just as important is for that person to say, oh, I've never thought of it that way, or I've never experienced it that way, but that makes so much sense. It helps them understand the world better because of that.
Yeah, because especially, you're only going to experience so many things firsthand, right? So hearing stories, you get different perspectives and viewpoints, and you hear things in different ways. But then through stories, you also like, oh, that touched me because I've been through that, and I'm familiar with that. And so that's what makes stories so rich and cool. And worth talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things that we'll probably keep coming back to over and over and over again throughout this is when we talk about, when we do reviews, when we have discussions, when we talk to you guys and ask you guys, what do you want us to talk about? What would you be interested in? And we do examinations or reactions to stuff,
right?
Kind of like we did. We've been working some with the new Dungeons and Dragons movie. We did kind of a discussion review about like kind of our reactions to that at first blush, and which I actually took my kids to see. Just yesterday. So it was.
You've seen it twice now.
I've seen it twice, and it was interesting like how the experience was different to when I was taking my kids.
Okay.
And to see like their reaction and that sort of thing like that, and see what they got a kick out of, and of course,
not to take too much content from something else that when we talk about it, but do you think you liked it better? Or did you enjoy it more that second time because of that?
Because of my kids?
Yeah.
I think I did enjoy it more because of my kids. Because there were elements where it was just really fun to bond over. Like, I had my middle child. She's about 11. And she was sitting next to me. She's like, Dad, that's a Displacer Beast. Like, she was just nerding out and stuff like that.
You were so proud.
I was so proud. I was
knew
like,
what it was.
It's like, yeah. So, yeah. And then a couple times, she would, like, she even knew. She's like, oh. She didn't know what gelatinous cube was.
Right.
Like, she didn't know the name for it. And she's like, I know it's an ooze. Like, sort of thing like that.
She knew the category.
She knew the category.
And she knew the category existed.
Yeah, exactly.
So you are a true nerd father.
Yeah,
well done.
I strive to be so.
Well done, sir.
Yeah, so that was exciting. So, yeah. So, like, yeah, this is some of what we talk about and everything. But, yeah, coming from about our different perspectives. So, what might make your perspective unique as opposed to like mine, Chris? Like something.
Man, my perspective. Well, to be honest, I kind of felt more of the lay person, just someone who, just, we both grew up in an era of when video games started coming out. I loved RPGs, watched a lot of movies, things like that. Grew up with anime. I'm Asian, at least half. So, anime it fit. Just had to happen. And so different cultural stories in that. So that's kind of my experience, my background there. But compared to you, I'd say you have like a profession in stories. You're an author. We should talk about that.
Oh, okay.
Your books are sitting on the table.
Yeah, these are some of my books. Not even all of them. So, yeah, gosh.
You've written a lot.
I have written a lot. And
that's Aaron D. Schneider.
Aaron D. Schneider at aarondschneider.com.
Right.
So yeah, I am an author.
So your job is to write stories.
It is, and it's interesting because I've had to, when you write stories, you not only have to write them a lot, obviously, but you have to like also read and absorb and refuel. So it's like kind of like this constant like coming in, going out process. So yeah, I guess I've had to absorb quite a bit of that sort of stuff. So yeah, I guess if you want to say I'm a professional in that regard, yeah, I have some experience obviously with the publishing side of things. Like you can go to my website, you can see I work a lot with LMBPN publishing, and so like that's where I've done a lot of my work with them, and they've been good to me, and I appreciate them. It's not the only thing I've done though, and so.
Because even before them, you were writing for.
Yeah,
you were dabbling at least part time.
Yeah. So
full time the last couple of years, but always had.
Yeah, it's been about probably 8 years writing. But like of that 5 years were more part time. So, and I my perspective comes from, I was a military kid, moved around a lot. And as a result, my mom gave me a copy of The Hobbit. Around like this was weird, right? We used to live on. So I used to. Funny enough, here's a fun factoid. I used to live in Japan when my dad was in the Navy, right?
And I'm the anime.
He's the anime guy, but I lived in Japan. But I was young, and one of the things we lived off base, and that was kind of an interesting, fun challenge for all of us to live off bases because we were kind of immersed in the culture and stuff like that of Japan at the time. I had to learn Japanese and all that sort of stuff. But we got to go onto the base to go get groceries and that sort of stuff, like once a week. And we did that. My mom would let us rent a movie from the exchange there, right? Okay. And one of the first times we were there, so kind of new kid, kid who doesn't speak the language, all that sort of stuff. And there was the Raskin and Bass Hobbit, right? The movie, right? The cartoon.
Oh, the animated.
Yeah, the animated one. And my mom got it for us, and she was like, "Oh, I love this." And so she got it, and me and my brother, like, you only had it for the weekend, right? And my mom, like, we ran that thing down to the point where my mom was like, "All right, time to know, like, you can't watch it another time, I'm getting sick of it or whatever." But my brother was really little, and I was like 5 or 6 or something like that, but I loved it. And at that point, my mom was like, "Okay, you loved it." Yeah, I was like, "Yeah." So then she called her mom, and she asked her to send my mom's copies of The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings. The books. The books, yeah, from like the 1960s edition or something like that, And so we got those, and my mom gave them to me, and she was like, "Here you go. You like them." Now, obviously, I was a little young, but I was a pretty good reader at the time, even for being about 6 years old. And man, I just dove into it, and ever since then, this sort of stuff has just kind of like been part of my life, in my blood, sort of thing like that. So, yeah, so I've been in love with the idea of a lot of this sort of stuff from a very young age, and part of it was just survival, right? Because I was a kid in a new place, didn't speak the language, was still just so fish out of water, and here was something that I could connect to, but it was unique and fun, and it was escapism in the best way possible. Right. So
not a bad place to escape to, Middle Earth. And that's really interesting that you mentioned that animated Hobbit, because I didn't know what it was called. I didn't know like the creators. Yeah. I'm guessing that's the 2 names you mentioned. Yeah. I didn't even know that even now. But my grandparents had a copy of that, and I was around 5 or 6 when I got babysat at their house, and I'd watch all the time. So that was the coolest thing. Yeah. Like I can even remember the scene of like Bilbo at the end during like the Battle of 5 Armies. I just remember being mad that he just sat by the tree, invisible the whole time. I'm like, dude, get in there. And then like someone crawls over and like dying. Maybe Bomfer or one of the dwarves comes. He's like dying. He's like, "We won," and I was like, Bilbo did nothing. But yeah, no, I remember watching that. That's really cool. So I guess we didn't even know we had that in common.
Yeah,
we're discovering things by doing this.
Yeah, despite all these years, right?
Yeah,
so,
that's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, we got Lord of the Rings stuff over there, so you can tell that we're into that. So
yeah. So
we got a good nerd background, I'd say.
Yeah, so I think we can come at it from a lot of different angles. Kind of one of the ways that I come at this too is as someone who is a writer and has had to write a lot, and even a lot more than even my published works suggest. But one of the things that I kind of come at things from is this question of artistry versus craftsmanship, right? And this has been my thing probably since I even thought about getting into writing, was to say like, okay, there's a place for artistry, right? And then there's a place for craftsmanship. But the idea of like, if you were going to be a successful creator, you have to be a craftsman, right? Because the idea that the artist puts himself, his soul, his experience, that sort of stuff into his work. The craftsman though does that, but with a purpose. Right. Okay. So you're gonna you go to a carpenter and you say, "I want a table." Right. Right. The artist part of him is gonna put his heart and soul into the table. Right. But if you show up and he has instead 3 stools for you, right? And he's like, "Well, that was what my soul, that was my artistic expression, was to get 3 stools." He would be like, "But no, dude, I wanted a table. I need a table.
I needed a table. This will not function for what I need."
Yeah, so I kind of come at it from that, like, of, stories are the same way. Like, we have to ask, like, what kind of story are we telling? And therefore, what's the craftsmanship element of like, what are the tropes? What are the different perspectives that we expect to see in this sort of thing like that? And you can have ways that it can challenge or play with or deconstruct to some extent, but at the same time, if you want a good story in that genre or of that style, you're gonna have to tell certain things, right? Like, I don't know a whole lot about anime, but I would assume there's certain tropes and things like that that you're expecting in an anime. And if you didn't get some of those different things, that would be, particularly in certain kinds of anime, right?
By tropes, you mean just kind of like the things you expect to see in all of them? Yeah. So you always expect someone to be yelling really loud and powering up at really pivotal moments.
For at least 2 episodes, right? So
depends on which one you're talking. You're talking about Dragon Ball Z or something. Yeah, you got 3 episodes of going Super Saiyan and then throwing one punch.
Hey, but it's all take, right? So, but yeah, like, so, if you're gonna, and if you're gonna do a Western, right, you're gonna have certain tropes that you expect. There's like certain tropes of the landscape. It's kind of like the idea of it's gonna be rugged, it's gonna be arid, that sort of thing. The idea of, you want these characters that exhibit certain traits,
right?
That certain things like that. And again, you can play with and deconstruct it, right, to some extent. And some really good stuff has done that, like
like adding a new spin or something like that.
Yeah, changing perspectives and sort of stuff like that. Like the Watchmen, right? Is a deconstruction of the superhero genre, as an example. Same with The Boys. That I think was another example of deconstructing the superhero genre. And so that provides a way, but at the same time, there's still tropes that you expect inside of that, right? There's still certain things that you're expecting. And if you don't get those, you're kind of disappointed, right? It's kind of doesn't, it's not as good or it's not as satisfying a story. So, and I think that's very much, I recognize that me getting to be an author and getting to tell stories is a huge blessing.
Right.
It's a huge, it's a huge privilege. And so there's some extent of where, like, I'm a craftsman. People come to me for stories that are of a certain type. I've written some, like my Outcast Royal series is, it's a sword and sorcery type story. And so there's certain things that people expect in a sword and sorcery style.
Right.
That, I want to honor that. I want to respect that. So I think it's a valuable thing to consider, and it's a valuable thing to bring when it comes to that sort of stuff.
See, I never really looked at it that way, and I think that being an author, you've really looked at that and dug into that. So it'd be nice to talk about these things and me ask you, like, almost come back to that and be like, all right, how were they good craftsmen in this, or how were they way too artsy and took it too far? So that'll be interesting. So I mean, I guess, what's it going to look like when we start doing these? I guess is a question we should ask ourselves. I think in the beginning, it's going to look like kind of like reviews, almost review style. Like watch a movie or play a game and review it.
Yeah.
But then with that kind of storytelling mentality in mind, like analyzing it in that way.
Yeah. Not
just if the game was good or if the movie was good overall, but really delving into the story, telling aspect, and that might change and develop over time, and see what the listeners want to hear.
For sure. But and we can, and the idea of us coming at it from 2 perspectives, right? I'm coming at it from the perspective of more of a layman, of like, if I'm just a guy off the street who's had some interest in that sort of stuff like that. Yeah. Versus the professional nerd, or whatever like that, who's like,
we're gonna call you the professional
nerd. So we're the NerdFathers come for 2 different things like that. I think that's valuable, and that's a good question to ask, because I think, and this is this is part of why we wanted to do this, was because more and more this is getting broken down, and it's a good thing, but a lot of times there has been sort of like this elitist mentality of like the people creating this content, sort of like, we'll tell you what you are supposed to like and not like. We'll tell you what your stories are supposed to be and everything like that. And on to some level, it's like, no, these stories don't just belong to you. Like, yes, and from the legal perspective of like, these stories belong to you from
IP, intellectual property kind of thing.
That sort of stuff. But there's to some extent, right? Like Lord of the Rings doesn't just belong to you.
Right.
Like it's been part of us. Harry Potter doesn't just belong to you.
Right.
Dungeons and Dragons doesn't just belong to you. Like there's these ideas of like how we have engaged and loved these things is part of what needs to be honored, and seeing how people have not respected or honored that, and therefore like story has suffered,
right?
And but at the same time, we want to celebrate when it's done well,
right?
Yeah.
So we'll kind of analyze those things closer. I'm tempted to do it now. Like, hey, give us an example of where it just it was really done, but don't know if we should save that for them.
No, like I think like we'll go ahead and give some previews, right, of that, like like we said, we did Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves. We still have plans to examine the God of War.
Oh, such a good game.
Yeah, those God of War series. Particularly number 4 is what we'll focus on probably initially.
Yeah. And maybe Ragnarok after that.
And then we talked about like examining like IPs, like when IPs get renewed,
right,
and people want to redo things like that. So like comparing like how it can be done right, how it can be done wrong.
Yeah.
We also have some plans to do. There's a few movies and different things like I haven't seen, and Chris wants me to see some stuff, and I have some stuff that Chris hasn't seen that I want him to see, and so we'll get.
So there might be some debate and some convincing.
Yes.
To do.
Yes. Yeah. And in fact, off of that one I thought would be a great chance we would take a look at something that you have a great love for, but I need more convincing of, and that is the video game Elden Ring.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
So, and like just for context here, Chris, reached out to me, and we were friends for a long time and different things like that. But he was like, "You gotta get a PlayStation, so that way we can play. You can play God of War because I'm tired of enjoying it and you not being able to talk about it with you, and then also we can get Elden Ring and we can play together." And so I broke down and got a PlayStation, so we could do that.
Little context: he was an Xbox guy.
I like
Xbox. I'm not gonna. I got one. Okay, I got the box right here.
Yeah.
Here it is. Xbox.
Yeah.
But always been a PlayStation guy first and foremost.
Yeah.
Your
first love.
I mean, Final Fantasy did that for me. So.
Yeah.
Which, when we're talking about storytelling, like, that's another game that's really big into storytelling. And it probably taps into that Japanese anime a little because it's a Japanese-made game.
Absolutely.
And kind of taps into that storytelling style and that culture. So it appealed to me. So PlayStation's always been, as far as video games, that's the way to go.
There you go.
But you can't get away from like things like Fable. Like Xbox has Fable.
Yeah.
So I'm like, dude, I gotta also get an Xbox for that. But yeah, I'm glad you did because you loved God of War, and I can't wait to talk about it.
Yeah, that's gonna be a lot of fun. But that's gonna require like a whole video of its own.
Yes.
But I got Elden Ring, and I have sunk, I would say at this point, probably about 30 hours into it.
The funny thing is like you don't realize how abysmal that is. The amount people have sunk into this game.
I'm sure, but I guess like part of my thing is like if I've sunk 30 hours into something and I don't feel like rewarded for it,
right.
I don't feel like oh man, I know where I'm going, I know what I'm doing, sort of thing like that. Yeah, it kind of leaves me like, so why am I still doing this?
Right.
In fact, literally, because you told me like, oh, you got to get in there, you just got to do it. It's the grind's part of the fun or whatever like that. And I emerged. I don't get to play a whole lot of video games because of work and everything like that, and that sort of stuff. But I emerged after, my wife was kind enough to give me about 3 hours where I kind of had some time just to do Elden Ring. And I emerged after 3 hours of that. And my wife looked at me coming out of the basement, and she was like, "You don't seem happier." Like usually when you get to play video games for a couple hours, you're in a good mood. You're happy because you got to and I'm like, I don't think I am happier. I think I'm more angry than I was when I first went down there.
The Souls games will do that.
Yeah. Sure. So what is it about Elden Ring? I guess both from a game perspective and a story perspective. Before I gripe about it,
this podcast is supposed to be about storytelling. Elden Ring might not be the best one because it's when you're talking about story, you gotta dig for it. You gotta work for it. Like you gotta pay for it. It requires a lot of you to get the story because there's pieces everywhere. So I can concede on the storytelling part that it's not as easy as God of War. God of War spoon feeds it to you.
Oh no, yeah. I mean, some people made the accusation, particularly like a God of War Ragnarok, that practically it's not even a video game anymore. It's just an interactive movie. It's the complaint. I don't think that you would go that far.
Yeah,
but that's the difference. And
maybe I guess that we got to decide how we tackle it, right? Are we gonna stick with just stories, or do we talk about how especially when we talk about video games, right?
Yeah.
So Elden Ring is a good game for other reasons than storytelling aspect.
Yeah, I think we can acknowledge that, right? Because we can acknowledge something like in a movie. A movie might have some really excellent cinematography and you know and stuff like
There's
that.
There's other art
and
pieces to it.
For sure. And we can acknowledge that and still say, yeah, but like story-wise is garbage. You know, like story-wise it just did not pull me.
Right. The cinematography was gorgeous.
Yeah, like you have some gorgeous shots and stuff like that. Looking at you, Avatar. But yeah, so you know, I think too, like go ahead and and try and tell me about why the game aspect of it is fun.
I think the biggest part, if we're gonna do this now,
go for it.
The biggest part is this might be for me, and I don't know if anyone else thinks this way. It's the sense of accomplishment, right? Because the game has been known, the point of the game is to be difficult. Like they don't make any ifs, ands, or buts about it. They're like, this game is hard, and you're gonna get frustrated, and you're gonna have to die to learn how to beat this game. And die you will, many times.
So many times.
And you're going to lose your stuff, and you're going to get mad. But then when you do it, you're like, I've done it! I've accomplished something great. Where some games, you're like, yeah, I mean, I don't know if you ever played Kingdom Hearts. It's kind of that, it was a Disney, Squaresoft mix, kind of Final Fantasy characters and Disney characters. Interesting combination. I played with my kids. So we're talking about NerdFathers, that's why that game was so good. They, it had some combat challenges, but nothing like Elden Ring. And it was more, but the story was good and things like that. But it's a basic hack and slash.
Yeah.
You cannot basic hack and slash Elden Ring. There's skill and patience. God, there's patience involved. You just want to hack and slash, you can't do that.
Yeah.
For the most part.
No, that's definitely part of Elden Ring that was difficult for me. Was at no point did I feel like I guess that was the biggest frustration I had. At no point did I feel like I was gaining ground, really. It was because at one point, I killed, my first dragon.
Right.
And one of the big ones with a name, right? Not just one of the other ones that's kind of hanging around, you kill those all day. But no, this is one of the big ones. And not the one that was chained up. Which doesn't count.
The really big one.
The really big one. But no,
they can't move.
Yeah, they can't move. No, it was it was the one in the swamp was my first one. And I got done with it and I was like, I just killed a dragon. It was huge and everything like that. But then literally I rode just a little bit forward and I got jumped by a couple of the skeleton looking dudes. Zombie-esque dudes.
Yeah.
And 3 of them you killed a dozen of them. They dropped me right there. I was like, I just killed a dragon. How does this happen?
The funny thing is, you're a big gothic horror guy. You love that stuff. And the whole point of gothic horror is there is no hope. Anything and everything is dangerous. And that's what the Souls games and Elden Ring does. So I feel like maybe you don't like being in the world. Maybe you just like hearing everyone else suffer in that world.
I'm a sadist like that.
Right. Everyone else can suffer, but when I'm in it, it sucks.
Well, I guess the idea that, to some extent, to feel in video games a sense of accomplishment and power of there are games that are more horror-esque, in that regard. Call of Cthulhu, Dark Corners of the Earth, right, is an example of one in which you play this character and a lot of it is just running away. There's just a lot of it is just running away. And there's or getting around different enemies and stuff like that. There's some combat, but a lot more of it is just trying to escape. And I get behind that, right, because the idea for that is my character is just a normal guy.
Right.
He's just a.
They're not emphasizing the combat in that game. Then.
No. The whole thing is just can you survive to find out more of the story?
Right.
Would be that, as opposed to Elden Ring, the idea of I'm collecting these runes. I'm getting new weapons. It's sort of like some of the power fantasy-esque stuff.
Right.
Where part of me is like, I should feel more accomplished. I should feel like
I've collected this many weapons. I've upgraded those weapons.
Yeah.
I've collected this armor.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's where most of the Souls game has some weird in between. Like you kind of feel like it should be that typical fantasy game where you gain armor, upgrade armor, level up, and now I'm bigger and stronger.
Yeah.
Nah. Not in Elden Ring. Not in the Souls games.
Yeah, and just sometimes it feels like, and I guess maybe part of it was my experience was so uneven, right? Because that one moment I was dropping dragons and stuff like that and felt very accomplished, and then the next moment I mistimed one block, sort of thing like that,
right.
And then from there I'm getting beat down by like base level mooks or whatever like that, and and I guess
it's
part
a game
of
that demands perfection.
Yeah, it's pretty unforgiving and that sort of stuff like that. Yeah, and and that whole bit about you collect your runes or whatever like that, and so like you dropped one of the times I dropped another major enemy, right, and then made it fine, and then I stepped on some kind of like poison rot mine or something like that, and all of a sudden I'm like rotting and I'm like, what's going on? My health is just dropping, and so I'm like, I'm trying like, oh crap, and then I died, and all the runes got dropped right there, and that represented like hours and hours of work, right?
Yes.
And then I'm like, I gotta go get those, but it's surrounded by the rot mine things, and so then I went back to go get them, and I get exploded on, and all of a sudden I die, and they're all gone, and I'm just like that was that was like 2 hours of work right there, man, just gone. And I know there's all the voice actor YouTube guy Sung Won, who ProZD or whatever I think is his YouTube channel. He talks about how if you ever like ask on the internet like how do you defeat the poop dragon or whatever, and then everybody gets on there, oh, is the poop dragon hard? Just get good,
right,
and I know all the Elden Ring fans and Dark Souls fans are all there like, well, Aaron, just get good. Yeah. Like, okay, look, I can't, so that's
right.
So
I only have so much time to devote to this.
Yeah.
I'm a nerd, but I'm also a father.
Yeah, father and a writer, and and books don't write themselves, man. Right. So, so accessibility. So it's interesting, right? Because that's where one part where it's kind of different, where you are much more capable of that sort of stuff. So in that regard, I guess I am the layman of games. I really enjoy them.
Well, you weren't allowed to play video games for a long time, right?
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, my mom was convinced at one point that they were very bad for me, and so she took away my Super Nintendo, and then there were no video games in that house.
I wish we had one of those soundboards that you could press the button.
Oh yes, took away my Super Nintendo, but my little brother got a Game Boy Color like a couple years later. I'm like, what the?
Yeah, you were a first child.
Yeah, just all. Yeah, I love my folks, but. The mistakes that get made sometimes, the first one. And I don't know, maybe it wasn't a mistake. Maybe it's good for me, so.
Maybe it was. Maybe it was good.
But yeah, I have my formative years of video game playing. Missed out on a lot. So.
Yeah. So you didn't play a lot of that early stuff, so maybe we won't talk about that. Although I'd love to talk about Zelda at some point, because, man, that's such a long-running game. And I started playing that on a regular Nintendo. So.
Oh, yeah. I do remember I had the Link to the Past or whatever like that. That was the first one I ever played.
Yep.
So
that was pretty good.
But yeah, so
this is what we're gonna be about. We're gonna be talking about stories through games, through movies, through books. Hopefully, at some point, we can get input from listeners. Say, hey, watch this movie or read this book or try this story. That'd be pretty cool. Yeah,
and you guys let us know what you have interested in. And we would love to, try and parse some of that out and figure out what we can do and be great. And we'll just, take it from there, and we'll see you next time.